You mentioned there your report on the grids and the importance of grids, electricity grids, in the transition more broadly. And obviously it's nowhere near as sexy a topic as AI and its applications, but it seems to be fundamental, right? And as your report points out, it has a potential to become a bottleneck. So why is that's inefficient or insufficient investment in grids, especially in the advanced rich economies?
I think you're right. In some strange way, grids are a little bit unsexy. Politicians, can get their brains around solar panels and wind farms and electric vehicles and carbon capture and storage industrial facilities. But these distribution grids that lay under our roads are, they're just there, but do we understand what they're there? And then, of course, transmission grids. You're never going to see a politician pulling the ribbon on the opening of a new pylon line, because although I quite like wind turbines, some people dislike them, some people like them, I don't know a single person who likes the look of a pylon. So they tend to be unpopular things. But we've got to focus on grids. If you look at the total investment needed to get us to build the clean electricity system that we need for the future, 40% of that investment is not the generation, it's the grids, both transmission and distribution. And we will have to build those grids much more than in the past. Now, we need, therefore, to be able to speed the planning and permitting process and we set that out in our report, to build them where we're needed. We need to be strategic, however, and sometimes by being strategic, we can reduce the number of pylons that we need to put across the land. For instance, in the UK, there's a lot of opportunity to bring the pylons from north to south along the seabed rather than visually over the land. And there's lots of technologies that we can apply. There are new cable technologies that can get bigger amounts of power times the same amount of cable, and therefore you don't have to increase the size of the pylons and increase the visual impact in order to get more power down the line. And then there's all this dynamic management that we've talked about applying AI. So grids has got to become sexy. It's a hugely important part of the challenge to go forward, and it also has some very interesting bottlenecks, and we've got to be strategic about these. For instance, if you talk to anybody building long distance transmission at the moment, where you go from DC lines, direct current, which you would do over a long distance, and convert it back to AC with a transformer, they will tell you that the supply of transformers in the world is dominated by a small number of companies which have very long lead times to supply you with transformers. And sometimes we've got to get smart in this energy transition about helping to identify well in advance where there are going to be bottlenecks, and encouraging either existing incumbent players or new competitors to put in place the capacity. Because at the moment, the supply of transformers, and I can bet your bottom dollar almost no politician in the world will be able to describe what a transformer looks like and what it precisely does, but the supply of that bit of kit is quite a major constraint.
Absolutely. And so the grids are really about, as you said, matching the supply and demand, bringing the energy to the demand centers. But what about the demand centers themselves? And obviously, urban areas are the big growing demand centers for energy. And you at ETC have looked at the sort of built environment and the role of urban areas and construction in those areas in energy transition. What, in your view and in your opinion, is the role of buildings, the built environment?
Well, look, the whole built environment, both residential and commercial, is responsible across the world on average for about a third of all emissions. So we need alongside electric vehicles and transport and ships and planes and industry, we need a very big focus on the built environment. And there is a very big opportunity to improve the energy efficiency of that built environment. The biggest expansion, let's remember, in the future will be cooling in the hotter parts of the world, most of the population lives in places where you want cooling rather than heating. We tend to have that sort of, it's all about heating up here in northwestern Europe, high latitudes, but most of the country, cooling's a bigger problem. We have huge opportunities to improve the technical efficiency of the heat pump technology which goes into air conditioning. And remember, the heat pump that you use to heat your house is just an air conditioner pointed round the other way. It's fundamentally the same technology, but air conditioning units can get much more technically efficient. But there's also big opportunities to improve the insulation of buildings to make sure that they stay cool. Incredibly simple things like painting roofs, white, and thinking about shading of streets. Incredibly important things that urban designers have got to get right, particularly in a warming climate where there's going to be a major effect of people of that heat. Here in the northern environments, our biggest challenge is to move from gas boilers to heat pumps, and it's very important to say it is to heat pumps, it's not to hydrogen. I think there was a danger in Europe and UK in particular that we spent a long time thinking about, will we keep our gas boilers and put hydrogen through them? Frankly, that is just pushing up water uphill in terms of the inefficiency and the economics of doing it. The future is electric. Heat pumps wherever possible, sometimes resistive heating. It does work best if you put in place at least some insulation, but one of the key messages of our report is don't make the best the energy of the good. It is not the case that you need to insulate to a sort of passive house level before it makes sense to have a heat pump. That's absolutely definitively not true, and I can tell you that because I've put in a heat pump at my country cottage. We've done the obvious things like double glazing and insulation in the roof, but we haven't done more than that, but it works beautifully. So we need to have this revolution towards heat pumps to improve the efficiency here. And then there are lots of other things which are important in this built environment. There is the issue of operational emissions, i.e. when you're heating the house, when you're cooling the house, when you're doing cooking, when you're doing a commercial HVAC system. But there is also how we build houses and build offices, reducing the cement or steel content, or making that cement or steel lower carbon and eventually zero carbon. So we need a strong focus, and we talk about it on our report, both on what are called embedded emissions, the emissions in the building, as well as the buildings in the operational phase, the use phase of the building.
And just to finish on a sort of outlook and the future about where we are heading, since we're at the 10 years anniversary of both the Paris Agreement and our Sustainability Week, where would you like us to be in 10 years? Where would you like us, what would you want us to be discussing in 10 years' time when it comes to energy transition? And is there any single thing, whether it's policy, regulation, or behavioral change, that you would like to see happen?
I would love to see in 10 years' time two things happen. An acceleration of the revolution towards electrification and the decarbonisation of electricity systems. The UK, worth pointing out, the UK in 2010, our electricity was 500 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. It's now 125 last year, and our aim is to get it to around zero, maybe 20 or 30 by the early 2030s. I hope we achieve that. I hope a lot of other countries achieve that. I would hope to see a real booster rocket going behind the application of what I think is going to be the killer app of the energy transition, which is solar plus batteries in the sun belt of the world, including low-income countries like Africa, because that technology has now collapsed in price so much that there is a huge opportunity to provide cheap, clean electricity for some of the lowest income people in the world. So I hope to see that. And I also hope that we will begin to see action on the hard-to-abate sectors of the economy, shipping and aviation, steel and cement and chemicals, where there are technologies which can get us to net zero. But unlike in the area of electrical supply or EVs, where the new technologies will be lower cost than the old, when we get to these hard-to-abate sectors of the economy, there will be a green premium. So what I hope to see there is global agreement on a carbon tax on shipping, which, by the way, is being debated here in London by the International Maritime Organization, the IMO, right now, today and tomorrow and the next day, but I'm sure we'll take baby steps towards it. But a serious carbon price on shipping and carbon pricing for steel and cement and chemicals spreading across the world. Turbocharge the decarbonisation of electricity systems and electrification and have serious carbon prices on the hard to abate sectors. If we could get there by 2035, we would be on a route to close to zero carbon energy systems by mid-century.
Well, that's a very optimistic and hopeful picture. So, Adair Turner, thank you so much
for
being here, and thank you.
Thank you.